Ladies and gents, welcome back to the channel today. And I wish I had better news, but no, this is not a clickbait video. This really is a serious, critical warning for most of you who live in the United Kingdom or who use and spend these things, which is the British pound, because we have just gone through a crisis over the last couple of days here that I don't think the average person really understands. In fact, I was out earlier this morning just doing my food shopping, and I always like to stop and talk to people, and it was just fascinating the amount of people that had no idea what had happened in the last couple of days. And many of you will probably have guessed already because I made a video 10 months ago on this. In fact, I'll just show you, and it's this video here on my channel. So I'll link to this at the end of this video so you can watch it. But it is about a pension crisis. But not just that, it's not just a pension crisis, it's also the almost collapse pretty much of the British pound. So I'm going to get into exactly what happened here and why the risk hasn't gone away despite the media trying to say the risk has now passed. It has not passed. This is only making it worse and worse and worse. So we started off last week with the pound losing a huge amount of value to the US dollar, and that was as a result of this new budget and what's been announced there. Not the best budget in my personal opinion, and I'm going to show you a couple of charts in a moment as to why this budget isn't as effective as it could be. But the main thing I want to warn you against right at the start now is, if you remember that video I made 10 months ago and even before then, a year and a half ago, I warned you all about your pensions, and I had a lot of the live stream questions. Neil, would you take out your pension as a lump sum right now? And I said, me personally, so this was a year and a half ago, yes, I would, but it's really each individual's personal decision. You know, you may need to take financial advice on it, but in my experience, the financial advisor is just going to tell you not to do that. But these pensions do have a major crisis, and so does the money, the savings in your bank account. Do you realize that yesterday the banking system of the UK almost collapsed? No, I'm not sort of being hysterical or extreme or anything like that here. This almost happened. The Bank of England had to step in because of these margin calls. In fact, I should probably explain this. So the pension funds, which are supposed to be super safe, as I covered a long time ago, I explained that they're not as safe as you may think, because they're chasing margin and chasing returns so badly. Because if you don't get a good return, then the people, so let's say it's a teachers union, for example, or a firefighter's pension fund, they take their funds, that money, elsewhere. So they're always chasing returns. So the pension funds take bigger and bigger risks. And actually this week was staggering, because the banks, and I think some of these banks did this deliberately because they were trading the currency, and we know the main culprits for this sort of thing who did it the last time. So they deliberately, some of these banks, and again, it's the biggest banks in the world, no surprise there, they did margin calls on these pension funds who are holding bonds. So the bonds, some of them collapsed. Like, some of these bonds dropped by 50%. So if you're wondering, why has my portfolio gone down? This is supposed to be the lowest risk. Why has it dropped so much? It's because the value of the bonds has dropped so much. And people don't realize that this can happen, because most people just assume that if a bond costs X, then that is the price of it and that's that. But actually, no, bonds do carry risk, just like stocks and other equities. They still carry a risk. So what we actually saw was just some craziness in the bond market. In fact, I can show you on the shared screen here. This is what happened this is the 10-year gilt, so the British 10-year gilt. This just absolutely ran out of control. And the only reason that it actually stopped at about 4.5 was because the Bank of England had to step in. And they basically said, we will buy as many bonds as humanly possible. And this, again, they're not even talking about this. This will add to inflation later on. because you've got to ask, where's the money coming from to buy these new bonds? So here's where the clash is coming in then. You have monetary policy and you have fiscal policy. So we've talked about this many times before. Monetary policy is at the central bank. So this is the Bank of England in this example. If you're in the USA, that would be the Federal Reserve. If you're in Europe, ECB, European Central Bank. So this is monetary policy. And they have several tools at their disposal, raising interest rates, lowering interest rates, quantitative easing, or they can do quantitative tightening, and that's reducing liquidity in the markets. These are some of their tools. Now, the fiscal policy is the government, and you need these two things to work side by side. They have to. If they are clashing with one another, you have problems. So what did I say would happen? Well, look where we are now. You have the Bank of England on one side, interest rates, which is the correct thing to do to stop this inflation, which is running away. It's about 9.9% today. And it hasn't really moved. We've sat around this 10%. This is the second month now. So they're doing the right thing. They're not raising the rates enough just yet, but they are doing something towards it. Now, the government is really stepping on their toes here, because what the government's doing is tax cut and terrible fiscal policy. What they should be doing is reducing government spending, which will work in accordance with the monetary policy. But instead, they're giving tax cuts to the richest people in the UK. They're also issuing more debt. When you issue more debt, this makes a whole host of problems, especially for the British people and the British pound, these things here, because they are going to start suffering even more inflation later on. As I've always said, inflation takes around 12 to 18 months to hit the economy. So you think, they've done you a big favor with energy bills and all this other stuff and PPE over COVID and all these other things. No, they've created a bubble of currency and they're devaluing your British pound. So if you're saving money in the bank right now, remember what I said, at least take a little bit of money out, whether you just take a little bit of cash out so that you've got some at home, or you do more severe methods, whatever you think is right for you. But remember, when you put that money into the bank now, it's no longer your money. It's classed as a bank asset and you are a creditor to the bank. People don't realize this. The same with bail-in law that exists now, which means if the bank fails, and remember, this week, the British banks almost failed. This would have been a contagious event which would have affected banks all over the world because they're so interconnected now. So what you've got with the British pound is inflation, devaluation, and a weakening of the British pound all at the same time. This is going to be an absolute nightmare. And I've said since the 1st of Jan, I said it in 2021, that by the 1st of Jan 22, we'd be in a recession. And we actually are. They're just not telling you that because they're fudging the numbers. The same with the CPI and the inflation rate. It's double what they are telling you. And Quasi and the Bank of England are crazy enough to say, we'll review the situation at the November meeting. So, sorry, what? It's September, the November meeting. This stuff could be worth, it's not going to be worthless, but it could be worth a lot less by then. I mean, I don't get it. What are they thinking? And now you're having all these scathing reports coming out from even the IMF, the International Mafia Fund, are just absolutely demolishing this plan and saying that they're taking the wrong approach. But unfortunately, the British public just doesn't understand that all of this new money that they're creating for paying for energy bills and buying gilts and all this other stuff, the British public doesn't, because we don't get taught this at school. We don't get taught this sort of macroeconomics. They don't realize that this is going to feed into more inflation. They just think it's free money. And we only have to look at the value right now of the Great British pound to the US dollar, and you can see it is in the dirt at the moment. So what actually happened then? Well, the Bank of England had to step in to stop £1.5 trillion of pension meltdown. So this is 20 million pensioners at risk. Pension funds would have faced mass defaults today without BOE, so Bank of England, action. Bank staff worked through the night on Tuesday and into Wednesday morning to prepare the unprecedented package, which will see it buying up a potentially limitless number of targeted government bonds. Limitless number. Since that statement, the pound has fallen sharply against most other major currencies, and the value of UK government bonds has fallen, pushing up their implied interest rates or yields. What does the FT say about this then? Well, BlackRock executive defends pension strategy that fueled the UK crisis. I can't even believe that it would be anything to do with BlackRock. So what did they do then? So counterparties demanded extra collateral as gilt yields rose sharply, risking a fire sale of assets as pension funds search for cash to meet these margin calls. The turmoil prompted the Bank of England to launch an emergency £65 billion, shocking number, bond buying program in an attempt to bring yields down and stabilize the market. The amount of liabilities held by UK pension funds that had been hedged with LDI strategies has tripled in size to £1.5 trillion in the 10 years to 2020. An important question now is how much capital asset managers have allocated for covering margin. Well, let me tell you, not a lot is my opinion. And that's why I said your pensions are at risk. This is a market with a very small number of natural buyers called pension funds and the Bank of England. So when they have margin call and there's no one on the other side of that trade, that creates a little bit, I'd say a lot of instability. So how's the UK doing then? Well, this is the inflation rate right now. April, it's been at 9%, May 9.1%, June 9.4%, July 10.1%, and August 9.9%. Now we've got a couple of charts here that just show the extent of this tax giveaway. This is the biggest since 1970. You can see under Truss here. This is absolutely enormous, only beaten by Heath. And how does this affect people then? Well, these are your income groups 1 through 20. And you can see the lowest income households will save £22.12 under the new tax cuts, while the richest households will gain an extra £9,187 a year, known as trickle-down economics. And we also have UK natural gas prices then. Look at this volatility, up massively year on year. We look at electricity prices then, and even worse than the natural gas prices, UK public sector net debt to GDP, so that's your gross domestic product, it is almost 100% according to Trading Economics, even worse than the 1980s as we go into this spiral. And the GDP is dropping off a cliff and is going negative. And what happened, you may ask, to the UK balance sheet? So the central bank actually going to quantitative tightening? Well, this shows it all. I think it's going to be very, very difficult indeed for them to start tightening as we go into this cycle. So ladies and gents, that is you up to date on this absolutely critical issue today. And if you think because you're in other countries that you're going to be okay, think again. This is going to spread, and now that we have the issues with energy and everything else going on, it is just a matter of time. You can't stop what's coming now. It is going to happen no matter what. It is going to be very, very bad. Please make sure that you are well prepared and positioned, as I always talk about, for this. And if you're not, then just remember, I do have a private community. Everything is in there on preparation, financial preparation. So that's it for today. Take care. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow for the walk and talk.